For Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser here today with a guest who doesn't really need a lot of introduction when you're talking about Louisiana high school sports. Hall of Famer Robin Fambrough, the advocate, who has been as close to the LHSAA and covering that organization for several years as anyone in the state. And obviously very weird times to be covering the LHSAA, like it is very weird times to be covering anything. And so Robin, I appreciate you taking a few minutes and kind of chatting out some of where we are now with some of these high school sports around the state, and particularly football with a new start date, we hope, of October 8th,
Yes,
announced on Wednesday. How you been
yes.
doing?
I've been doing great. Thank you for the great lead up. You praised me too much. You know that, right?
I don't,
Um,
I don't know that you can praise you too much for that.
no, I mean, this is something none of us ever imagined. And we keep saying that over and over again because I saw a headline again today that said, "A year like no other." And it's like, we're going to keep saying that. We're going to keep saying that. Um, I'm just like you. Everybody I talk to, they ask, do you think we're going to play? You think we're going to play? And I keep telling them, I hope we're going to play. And even as I appreciate the bold steps that the LHSAA took this week, I think they needed to. But you and I know there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen between now and then for this date to be met. And then there are concerns also moving beyond that. And I know the LHSA is preparing for all those contingencies. What if you have positive tests? What if you have this? Um, I mean, everybody has great ideas about this, but the bottom line I keep reminding people is, especially the ones who want to armchair quarterback or Monday morning quarterback the LHSAA, is none of us have ever done this, including the LHSAA, including the NFHS. I was on the NFHS Zoom a week ago. It's pretty much the same deal. I mean, everything that people want to bash the LHSAA for, a lot of other states are in the same boat. So,
Yeah, we're really good at that right now. I mean, as a country, whether it be sports, politics, any aspect of life, it's very easy to criticize from the outside. But I consistently am pleased that I don't have to make these decisions because I don't know how you go forward through some of this, and so I don't envy Eddie Bonin or any of these folks at all.
oh, I don't envy Eddie. I don't envy teachers. I don't envy coaches. Frontline workers. I mean, one of my daughter's best friends works in an emergency room and has been involved in COVID. And I mean, you want to talk about heroes? I mean, there's a lot of them out there, and some of them are coaches, and some of them are first responders. Um, and we're thankful to have them, and we have to support whatever steps they need to make. And they're going to be tenuous steps because this is not a one size fits all. With regard to the LHSAA, you've got schools that are going to be starting after Labor Day. You've got schools that started this week, some that are going to start next week. I'm sure you saw the thing with Zachary because they had some issues. They had some positive tests with staff. They're going to push back their start date from the 10th to the 17th. So you're going to have some rolling dates like this that are going to continue. And I know some school systems have actually shut down all practices, which, that's tough too. Now, a couple of them are going to come back next week. I don't know how that's going to look because you've got to at least be doing something. Along with everything else, you got to understand we're worried about a virus, but we're also, and a virus, by the way, that we know did not go away with heat. Well, that's our other problem is heat. We have to make sure, especially the ones that are involved in the outdoor sports, meaning football and cross country, that they are acclimated, especially football players wearing uniforms. They have to be acclimated for the heat and for the physical contact. And that's a huge, huge question as to how we get there and what it looks like. And I mean, the plan that Eddie put forth is ambitious. It would require 35 days in a 42-day window. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. But, what else have you got? You want to try to do the best you can for the students.
Yeah, I think as people have asked me, as you mentioned, any conversation seems to come down to a coach or parent ultimately asking, what our read on a situation is, and it's so difficult to get much of a read. But I do feel a level of, I guess, hurt and disappointment by what we saw with the spring sports this spring and those missed opportunities for those student athletes, that everyone involved from the LHSAA side is so determined to, whatever the answer is, find a way to make sure that we don't lose these opportunities in their entirety for these athletes.
Oh, I think that's a huge thing because, I remember talking to Eddie the day that I had to call it off. And of course, you saw the stuff that went on after that. That's a terrible call. Why did they do that? And it was the right call, absolutely 100%. But I think the most telling thing, that takes us all back to March. I remember knowing, because at that point I was still recovering from an ankle surgery and on a scooter and all other kinds of weird things and rolling around at games that were being played local, and I was glad they were local. Going to Scotlandville, knowing that this was going to be the last high school event, maybe of the year. But the realization we all had at that point was, hey, you know what? Maybe in a month or two we will be back, and we'll have that. And I remember talking to him that day, and the day that they announced that they had to pull the plug on everything. And it was kind of that realization of, we didn't think we would be here. And that was the worst feeling in the world. I've talked to other directors, the guy and the gentleman, Lance in Arkansas. A lot of people are in favor of this option where you flip and you bring your spring sports around. Well, there's problems with that both ways, but he probably put it the way I guess most of your state directors are looking at it. He said, he says, one of the reasons why I can't do that is, what if you wind up losing a season for those children again? He says, in good conscience, I can't do that. And of course, there are other health reasons for that now too. Somebody I heard brought that back out again the other day after the LHSAA came out with its plan. And, I'll come out and say it. I don't think you can flip seasons now. If you were going to commit to flipping seasons, you would have had to have done that a month ago to give those sports a chance to get their plan together. Because right now, there are baseball teams that have played. There are softball teams that have played or whatever. But they would have to order equipment, which is hard to do right now in a pandemic. They would have to do all of these other things. And I just don't think you could say, even 21 days from now, oh yeah, let's go do that. I think we're married to what we're married to right now. What are, I know we've gotten, I'm gonna pick your brain for something here. We've gotten a lot of different responses. What kind of concerns are people telling you? And I'll share with you some of the ones they've told me.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the October 8th date hit and I was looking at the calendar and factoring in what you had just mentioned of, we've kind of gotten to this point waiting and trying to have as much information at the start of a new school year as possible, that it would be difficult to flip at this point. But I'm looking at the calendar and realizing that we now have about as little wiggle room or room for error for any further pushbacks of football. And you hear coaches reference, I mean, we've seen issues with us not progressing through the phase system as quickly as would have been ideal, because nothing's been ideal this year. And so if we don't hit phase 3 by the end of August, or if we get to phase 3 and then backslide because people end up infecting one another, whatever the case may be, what happens then? And for me, if we get closer, I mean, to the end of September or even into October and are restarting and then have, another wave of cases climbing come through, what happens at that point? Because we're kind of, as we push things back, it just compresses all of those sports over a much smaller window that you're trying to figure out then later down the road. And I think that's kind of the first bigger thing, but obviously there's a lot.
There's a lot, and I know what everybody wants to avoid. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of people waited until played high school and college sports. I do agree with that. But, and this is something Eddie and other people reference. The SEC South is what it is, and football is what you look for. Now, it's a different animal, though. You can kind of put your players sort of in a bubble there where you really can in high school. But, the thing nobody wants, that some other states have already committed to and others may have to, is the thing where you try to do this all of in the spring. And Nobody wants that. I hope that's not what we have to do. I don't know how feasible that really is. I know one of the states, the model they have is first 10 weeks would be football. Second 10 weeks would be winter sports, and then 10 more weeks would be the spring sports. But I mean, I don't know where we are. We don't know about vaccines. We don't know about treatments. We don't know about fans. Fans is another whole different ball of wax. Which the interesting thing there, I heard from Dr. Stewart and Eddie and David the other day, and I'm sure you heard the same thing, is the final decision on fans will ultimately be up to the school districts. And I've got personally a lot of apprehension about that because of what I've seen with regard to people trying to have concerts and other events now. There was that one in May, I think it was, in Tennessee, and it was a big concert venue and it was outside and it was a great idea. They supposedly had it marked for social distancing. Everybody, ripped the artist, although he was just fulfilling a contract. Well, guess what? Within 3 songs, everybody's jammed up by the stage. And then about 2 or 3 weeks ago, they had a drive-in concert, which to me, that made more sense. Drive in, stay in your car. Well, they told them, they said, hey, you can put a lounge chair, outside your car. You want to listen. All right, I'm good with that. They gave them restroom facilities. I'm good with that. But the same thing happened. They got into it and everybody crowds together. And that's one of my concerns about having a significant number. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, 6 feet here, 6 feet here, 6 feet here. You've probably been to a few practices like I have, and you've seen how hard that is for the kids to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine a student section?
Right.
And some families and all, and there's just so many layers to this. I mentioned the thing that Landry Williams told me about from Madison Prep, and different schools have different approaches and different ideas on this. And they're treating it, he was telling me, almost like it's a medical thing. Obviously, nobody has access to locker rooms. So they come, they bring their water. That's how it is now. But they are instructing their kids to treat it the way we've heard medical personnel do. When they get home, you come in the back door, you take off your clothes there, you go take a shower. And part of the reason there is he knows a lot of their kids live in multi-generational homes. And it's kind of scary to think about because I hadn't really thought about that, but it really does make a lot of sense. And, that's why this approach has been all over the place. Everybody's got a different one.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the multi-generational homes. That's, as much as we obviously don't want any kids to unnecessarily end up with COVID, every person that ends up with the virus is just then a threat to spread to anyone they come into contact with, and becomes such a huge ripple effect. And so this affects so far beyond just the actual athletes
sports.
in a school
sport.
or a community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, every school is coming up with its plans for that. I think they all have good ones based on, what their specific instances are. And they screen, they do the temperature checks, they do what they can. Some have had, when they know there's an issue, they have kids that are tested, and they've had some that have tested positive. I think, most of this happened during what they call the summer period, where they weren't obligated to tell the LHSAA, since it was summer rules, not LHSAA. There were, like, out of the 64 parishes, they had schools in maybe 50 that reported athletes that reported cases, or maybe 50 schools. And if you figure there were 50 that reported, there were probably more that probably didn't because they didn't need to, or they didn't feel compelled to. So, and you're assuming they've learned from that. I know one of the things the coaches are, they feel like they've kind of been put under a microscope. And I feel like, by and large, they've all done a good job trying to implement the guides that the LHSAA has and the other people have. And, it's a weird deal when you look at that on one side, and then you have say like the youth baseball and youth softball and whatever tournaments that really aren't that, and there's not any social distancing. So I mean, it's been weird. My next concern, I'm curious as to what happens as we do get closer to contact. What I'm hoping is, now that we have this date, this set of dates, that people buckle down and do the best they can to try to limit the spread. That they know this is, before it's kind of just been a nebulous thing, it's been out there. Now we have something to shoot for. If you're volleyball, you know that you're going to get your chance to do more, hopefully in a couple of weeks, and then your season could start on September 8th. Cross country and swimming, they've got their guidelines. They're actually going to start on time. So that's going to be, I know a lot of people don't keep up with those sports, but that's going to be another dynamic too that's going to be a little bit different. And I mean, Eddie even alluded to that a couple of months ago. He says, you know, we're going to have volleyball teams that play 8 or 10 matches before football even plays a game. I said, well, yeah, that could happen. So, you know, but, and those sports are going to look different too. Like cross country, they're going to do like waterfall starts, because you can't let them all start at the same time.
Yeah, I was interested to hear about cross country, because I mean, as you said, as Eddie said, there's a lot of attention on football in this state at all times, but there are other fall sports starting before then, and cross country, we're used to seeing a pack of runners all at that line.
We're used to seeing a pack of runners, and then the other thing too, and I've been talking to coaches, is you and I have been to those meets, and you know, that's always been my joke, is that some of our other sports are some of the best kept secrets that people don't know. You've been to those meets at Highland where you have all of those people there. Well, that's not going to be a possibility. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And I actually told them, I said, well, you know, one way you can eliminate a lot of that, I said, first of all, you can't invite as many teams, but the other way you eliminate that, I hate to say this, you have them during the week when nobody can come. And that may be one of the things they're looking at, but I know they're looking at waterfall starts where they have so many at a time. You will no longer, you know, they have a long finish shoot. That's not going to be a thing anymore. There's just going to be a different set of protocols there. For swimming, for warm-ups, you will only have 3, and even workouts, 3 swimmers in a lane. Usually you might have, and of course my daughter was a swimmer, you might have 8 or 10 kids in a lane. And basically, if you have a large team, like say locally Catholic High or St. Joseph's, they may need the whole pool to warm up in. And you won't have any fans there. It'll just be the athletes. The other thing that people may not be aware of, even with football, is the ref with the whistle in their mouth. That's not going to be a thing now. They're all going to order electronic whistles, or they've ordered them, and guess what? They're on back order. So volleyball, they're going to kind of work that out. That's going to be your first test for fans. That's going to be interesting to see how they do that, because some schools have talked about, you know, well, if we can't have fans, maybe we live stream. And of course, that also brings into account the other thing: how do you pay officials if you don't have a gate for some of these sports?
Yeah,
you know, I had a football coach tell me the other day he would rather have a jamboree. He would rather have a jamboree than a playoff game, because sometimes you make more money on your jamboree than you do a playoff game, because you've got so many people coming and going. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I've been very interested in
to see how we do once we get more into contact. Yeah.
The amount of, I mean, the amount of financial implications for these schools with football, and then, I mean, once you get to higher levels, obviously, and are talking about college and pro, that gets into the billions of dollars. But for the budgets of these athletic departments and schools that we're dealing with, potentially missing out on fans throughout an entire season would certainly play a huge impact.
Well, a lot of them use the gate from football to not only fund football, but to fund some of their other sports too. And you've been to games, and I have too, where they have the other sports doing fundraisers while they're there, whether it's a ticket draw or whether it's selling something or whatever. So I like what Todd Black did, where he said he started to see people who are fundraising for schools and to not dismiss that. Because, I made the joke about people having to sell donuts to pay for their officials, and that may not be a joke. You may wind up having to have these fundraisers in order to do these things. So those of us being members of the community need to be aware of that, and they need to support them.
Yeah,
Because that
no
may be
doubt.
part of a lifeline.
You mentioned kind of the mindset now that we have some more firm dates that we're aiming for. I talked to some coaches, I guess, earlier in the summer who referenced concerns about if we had a plan and got the kids geared up to aim for a date and then that fell through and we kept having that occur and kind of kept last minute pulling it out from under them, what impact that would have on their mindset and focus and things like that. But I know now that we have a date, even though it's been referenced as ambitious by Eddie and the LHSAA themselves, everyone's excited for that firm date to kind of aim for. How do you view that sort of balance between the positive energy of, okay, these are the dates we're looking for, versus if there do have to now be further changes, some of the deflation that could occur, and there's no right answer there, I guess, but
there's no right answer there, and that's why I thought what Darnell Lee said, the East Ascension coach, said that actually made it in the main article, and it was in my reaction today, was he actually thought his kids would be more excited. And I did talk to some coaches who said, hey, guys, we've got a date. We're going to start on. And there were kids that were excited, but he said his kids were kind of maybe dismissive, but they were maybe skeptical would be the right word. And I think part of it is these kids have hoped and wanted for so much, whether it was spring sports or whatever, that some of them are already to the point that, okay, tell me when it happens. And that may not necessarily be a bad thing, but by the same token, I think we need to be focused on dates. I think those of us who work in the media certainly need to be focused on dates, because it gives you something to shoot for. Will it be deflating? I think you have to be prepared for that, and I think our coaches are aware that they need to be prepared for that. You can't just be Pollyanna and say, oh, good, we're going to play on, we're going to have a jamboree on the 2nd and we're going to have, a game on the 8th. No, it may not be that. And, I had a volleyball coach, Allison Leak from Sandoval, who told me this past week that she said, I prepared our school, said, look, we have that first game. She says, we don't know what we're going to have. This was before the dates came out, obviously. She says, our first game might wind up being senior night. It might wind up being our pink game. It might wind up being our shirt off the back game. We may want to get everything, she says, because you want to give these kids everything you can in the time that you have. And I think that's maybe the best thing to do, is just to focus on the time that you have. And now you focus on, sure, getting through the phases, but making the most of your practices to get prepared. Building the team aspect of it, building toward that date, and looking at alternatives, because we've got some schools that are, that's the other part of this too that's going to be interesting for football. We've got some schools that are going to wind up with some schedule conundrums here. I mean, Zachary lost theirs because Brandon, Mississippi, it doesn't match up. That was a week 3 game, and they're further along in their season, and Brandon, Mississippi's already found another opponent. So Zachary's going to look for an opponent for that first week, and ironically, West Monroe's also open. Wouldn't that be interesting if that were to happen? But I had that discussion with somebody last night. And then there was another one where, okay, you're supposed to play your week 3 opponent in what's actually week 5. So you're sliding the schedule back. And I got a feeling that some people are going to be redoing their schedules, and to a degree. And you may wind up making sure if you don't have the slot there for that rival, you make sure that if y'all can work it out, that you get that rival in, or you get somebody in that you need there. It's going to be interesting.
Yes, some of those adjustments are definitely going to be interesting. And I know another kind of, we still have a long way before we get to a potential championship. But another interesting bit that's come up the past few weeks that was discussed in that call Wednesday is the invite for the private or the select schools to come back together and play their championships at the same time, same venue as the non-select schools. What has been some of your reaction to that? They should have the feedback from the select schools now, by the end of this week. And
I think they were supposed to get that yesterday. I'm not sure. I think that was the deadline. I talked to some people who filled out. It was a survey, obviously, and there were choices of where would you want to do this for football only? Would you want to do it for these sports also? So it's kind of a possible mix and match thing. And I really wish, because some people really lost their minds over this, a few anyway, Wednesday, was that don't read more into this than there is. This is a one-shot exception. It is a business decision that will benefit both the LHSAA and the select schools. It will benefit all schools because your select schools, now everybody's, they're just bailing out the select schools. No, there's a give and take here. Yes, it will help select schools because they won't have to worry with finding venues and all of that because all administrators are going to be stressed this year no matter what. But also from an LHSAA standpoint, it consolidates things again so that you don't have to worry about, we've got 3 here on this day and here, we got 1 here and 1 here and 1 here. You know where they are. I think it's they called it a grand gesture, which it was, but I think it's also a very smart business decision for both the LHSAA and all of our schools. Now, one-shot exception. In order for this to become a permanent thing, it still has to be proposed again, and it has to be approved by 3/4 of the January membership at the January convention. That's already failed twice. Now, could this help? Maybe. But don't read more into this than it is. Just let it happen. If that's what it needs to happen, let it happen. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I was curious your take on that because it obviously, as they explained it, it was a one-time. It just made a lot of sense under these dire circumstances to do it from a logistics and all of those reasons. But could it be sort of a start to a bridge, right? That maybe we see an impact long term. But
I would like that. I would certainly like that. But you've got some really polar opposite views on that. And I guess I'm going to go on ahead and say this publicly. We're kind of with the LHSAA and have been for a while since around 2013, 2014, kind of like we are nationally. You're either for it or against it. And that's why when a lot of things started happening politically, nationally, and it's like, well, I think I've already seen that. And it's a different scale and a different thing, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. But again, I hope it's a bridge, but at the very least, just don't lose your mind over this. If it winds up being a thing, it's a good thing for everybody because it helps everybody who's affiliated with high school sports. And I'll even get a little selfish about that, where it will help us in the media because our outreach is not as what it used to be because, there aren't as many of us as there used to be. And the resources aren't what they used to be, just because that's what it is. It's in all forms of media. If you can shrink things, at least for this time where we're in a world that none of us know or none of us fully understand yet, so be it. And just maybe it winds up being a good thing because you and I both agree on a lot of that. There's a lot of things with the split that I've never really gotten, and other things that I do, but hopefully it works.
Yeah, your point, the kind of comparison to where we've been in the LHSA and where we are kind of nationally. I saw somebody on Twitter posted something recently about some very seemingly small, non-controversial thing, was not at all political, social, etc., and said, how are we in this argument about this? Like, how do you have this strong of a take? And I said, that's kind of where we are. Like, everyone has to
Everybody has, yeah,
feel firm
everybody,
about whatever, like coffee mugs, water bottles,
yeah,
like everyone
yeah.
has to have something to say, and it has to be black or white and
It
no
has to be
conversation in the middle.
right, right, right. And at the end of the day, especially those of us who cover sports, these are schools and these are athletes, and you have wonderful student athletes and wonderful coaches who work on both sides. A lot of coaches who have worked on both sides, and that's kind of one of my more interesting deals. Is we have a lot of people that when they flip from one side to the other, there's a difference in opinion, and it's like, wait a minute, okay, we went from one side to the other, and now we're all this instead of all that. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but God, let's just do whatever we can to let the kids play, tell their stories about them playing. There are a lot of good stories out there, and we just want to see them play and get the chance to go out and watch them play, whatever sport it is. And even maybe we don't get in. See, the big fear is now, like you say, we wind up getting pushed to the spring. Maybe it does wind up being a 6-game season. It's better than no season. What if it winds up being 6, 7, or 8? If we've learned anything in the last 6 months, it ought to be that we have to make concessions in life and concessions in other things. This is not the world that we had. I think when I went to cover that last basketball game, we're not in the same world right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of what we are trying to figure out now that you have to say, it's not ideal, but nothing's ideal, and we just have to figure out what works and salvages some of it for the kids.
Yeah, and I mean that's what the coaches want. The coaches have wanted their kids. They've wanted to see them, because a lot of people have said, well, I've had people who have said, that's bogus, that they say they want to see their kids. They want to do this. They see them on Zoom. No, Zoom is not the same thing as being there. I mean, I had one coach who told me a great story about just being out on a walk in like the subdivision with his family, and just sort of randomly running into one of his players who he hadn't seen for 6 or 7 weeks, and socially distanced, obviously, but just he went on for 2 or 3 minutes about how great it was to see this kid, because he could look at him and see he was okay, and that, oh, maybe you've been doing the workouts, and maybe you've put on a little weight and you look happy, and all of that. And that's a big part of our human condition too. Coaches, people, that's part of it.
So yeah, hopefully at some point here safely we get a chance to be back in person, see those kids do their thing on the fields, courts, tracks, everything.
Wherever.
Yeah. Obviously there's in about a month from now, there's the next scheduled executive committee meeting, and Eddie
Right.
referenced to expect more information to come out of that. Until we get to that point, is there anything that you're really, or I guess until August 28th when we hear more from the governor, is there anything specifically you're kind of interested to see over these next couple of weeks or keep an eye on?
I'm kind of interested to see, and I'm going to talk to some people later today, what different practice routines they adopt, because now this is a little different. Now, that's not to say I don't think anybody was preparing to play a game this month, because physically you really couldn't, based on the state of reopening we were in. But when you're talking about it, you actually have this date and it's out there. You worry about burnout with your athletes. I'm curious to see how that works. And for these sports that are starting, I'm curious to see what that looks like, and what does it look like when you go to that first cross country meet where they have like this waterfall start or volleyball, because one of the things too that a lot of people have talked about, and it's going to be interesting, is to see how many schools, a lot of our schools already pick up on live streaming. If there are issues with fans, how many more schools start doing that or try to start doing that? But I'm just curious to see how we react, how the schools react, how the kids react, and anything that changes
Yeah,
to
no doubt.
change your routine.
Yeah. Definitely going to be a lot to keep an eye on. I appreciate you taking some time today to chat with me about some of it as we try and figure it all out.
Well, anytime, you know that.
Sounds good, Robin. Thanks again. It's Robin Fambrough from the Advocate, keeping an eye on the LHSAA as we try and get back closer to some sports for Louisiana versus all y'all. Jarrett Roser.